Hi, it's Dave here again, and we are continuing our little mini video series on the topic of bloating. We've already covered how a bunch of bad stuff can get into the digestive system and trigger bloating, and we've also covered the digestive juices as well, and how a lack of stomach acid, digestive enzymes, bile and things like that can actually change the microbiome in the digestive system and predispose to the overgrowth of bad bugs, which then create bloating as well. In this video and the final video in this little series, we're going to talk about the good food and the good bugs, and they're kind of interchangeable. It's not easy to talk about one without bringing the other one into the discussion. And the reason is as follows. As you know, we have a very, very complex ecosystem which we call the microbiome in the digestive tract. We have a few bacteria in the stomach, we have a lot of bacteria in the small intestine, and we have a massive amount of bacteria and other microbes in the large intestine. And one of the problems that we have is we got to feed those microbes, but we don't want to overfeed them. Our diet needs to be optimal for making sure that those friendly microbes get as much nutrition as they need to stay nice and healthy and happy. But if we overdo it, if we eat too much of the foods that they enjoy consuming, then they can overgrow and start to cause a problem, particularly if some of those foods favor the growth of some of the bugs over the other ones. We can always have a dominant organism if we're not careful because of an imbalanced diet, shall we say. Now, what's the relationship between food and bugs, good food and bugs, rather than the bad foods that we've already discussed? Well, fibre acts as a prebiotic substance, meaning that the microbes within the microbiome really thrive on the right amounts and the right types of fibre in the diet. And sometimes we can undereat fibre, and sometimes we can overeat fibre. Now, if we undereat fibre and nutrient-dense foods, all this stuff that the microbiome loves, then we can end up with a reduction in the quantity and diversity of those good bugs in our digestive system. And that opens the way for some of the bad bugs to muscle their way in and start to overgrow and potentially dominate the ecosystem. And when that happens, we may find that we start to get bloated, because as we've said in previous videos, we had a lot of fermentation of sugars, carbohydrates, and fiber-based foods when we eat them. So that's one problem. I think fiber being a prebiotic and looking at the state of the diets that we have in Western Europe and in North America and Australia and places like that, if we're not careful, we can really starve the friendly microbes of what they really love to eat, and that can lead to a lot of problems. But it's not the only problem. There's another reason why, the bad bugs can become depleted. They can become depleted because of many other factors. I'm going to talk about those in a little bit more detail in the final video in the series. But again, if we combine these factors, if we're not eating fiber-based foods that feed the microbiome, and that microbiome is already a little bit out of balance, when we take something like antibiotics, or when we have a stressful event in our lives which we know also affect the microbiome, then the problems compound themselves, one on top of the other, and that can then lead again to a very dysfunctional microbiome. It's way out of balance, the bad bugs get in and they start to cause a lot of problems. And so I think it's really important from a general sort of hints and tips perspective to make sure that you are eating plenty of high quality foods that contain the right types of fibre, and these are really just the naturally occurring foods that you will get if you eat a balanced diet. So vegetables, fruits, etc. Will provide you with plenty of diets. A certain amount of grains can be helpful as well, but the problem with grains is there's a lot of controversy about whether they're really supposed to be part of the human diet, and the grains can actually cause other problems in some people. So sticking to whole foods, vegetables, fruits, and certain types of beans and legumes can be okay if they're not overeaten and if they're prepared in the right way. But the problem is, again, if you already have bloating, you might find that some of those so-called good foods that contain plenty of prebiotic fibers and nutrients and what have you actually make you feel worse. So when we're focusing on good foods are very situational or contextual. There may be a really cool set of foods that works wonders for keeping the microbiome in balance before any problems develop. But if the problems have already developed because of things like antibiotic stress, etc., and the microbiome is already imbalanced, if there's already fungal overgrowth, if there's already small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, then actually some of the good high fiber foods that would normally be great for feeding the microbiome can actually feed the bad bugs that have already overgrown and cause problems. And so we get emails and we get contacted by people, who say, what's the right diet if I have bloating or heartburn or constipation? And the answer is we don't know, because we don't know what the underlying cause of the problem is. If the underlying cause of the problem is already a case of SIBO, then the diet has to be adapted to that particular scenario. If the person has something like candida overgrowth, then the diet has to be adapted to that scenario. And so there's no real one-size-fits-all dietary approach that is perfect for bloating. But the diet can help bloating, and it can also cause the bloating as well. And so this is where I think a little bit of individualized care and running the right kinds of tests can be really gold, because without understanding what's actually going on in the digestive system, it's very difficult to know which specific foods, even the world's healthiest foods, are going to be right for a given individual, because the pattern of imbalance in the GI tract might differ from person to person. So that's a little bit about friendly foods. Now, of course, if you need more fiber in your diet, you can always supplement, but you shouldn't really need to supplement with things if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet that's right for your individual needs. But certainly, under certain circumstances, the right types of fiber supplements can also be very beneficial as well. But I would always hesitate to say, go and take supplement A, supplement B, supplement C, because I don't know what's going on in your digestive system. And until I do, I have no idea whether that recommendation is actually going to be helpful for you or whether it's going to be detrimental. So in the final video, we're going to look a little bit more in detail about making sure we've got enough friendly bugs. Certainly, the foods that you eat contribute to the health of your microbiome, but there's a whole bunch of other factors involved as well, and we'll talk about them in the next video.